There he is. Loud and clear. My voice, you could probably hear me without the Zoom.
So for the members of the public joining us virtually, just turn off your camera and mute your audio until the chair calls upon you. I would prefer not to turn off your video because it's hard for you.
Recording in progress.
So just to clarify, members of the public that are attending via Zoom, please turn off your mic and your camera. The individuals that you see with the cameras on are Director Brander and Director Scott. Alternate Director Scott, acting in the place of Director McCormick. And then that way we end up with a meeting with a screen full of a bunch of faces. It's confusing. Okay, it's 3 o'clock. So I think this chair's sinking. Okay, it's 3 o'clock. I'm going to call this meeting to order, and I'm first going to recognize that this meeting is taking place on the traditional territory of the Tla'amin people. Moving on to item number 2, approval of the agenda. Are there any additions or changes? If not, I'm looking for a motion to adopt the agenda. So, Director Lennox, seconded by Director Elliott. Any discussion? None. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. On to item number 3, adoption of the minutes. April 29th, 2025. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, looking for a motion to adopt. Director Lennox, and seconded by Director Southcott. All in favor? Any opposed? None, that is carried. Okay, on to delegations and inquiries. 4.1. Delyth Harper, Foundry qathet, Project Manager, refunding request for capital development of Foundry qathet. Long time no see.
So you've heard this before, but it is slightly different this time.
Okay. And what is it, 10 minutes or 5?
10 minutes.
You see, you have 10 minutes, and if you go over, then we'll seek consent from the board if the time needs to be extended. So go ahead, the floor is yours.
Okay, awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to present today on behalf of Foundry qathet. My name is Delyth Harper, and I'm the Foundry qathet Project Manager. And today I'm going to quickly touch on who Youth and Family is, what Foundry is, why it's needed in our community, and how it provides comprehensive, high-quality healthcare for young people aged 12 to 24. So Youth and Family is a host agency for Foundry qathet, and our offices are located on the traditional territory of the Tla'amin Nation. We're a nonprofit organization and a registered charity. Youth and Family is the leading service provider for youth in our community, and these services will integrate well with Foundry programming. So what is Foundry? Now more than ever, we know that youth need support. Foundry's mission is to support young people in living a good life and to transform access to services for young people aged 12 to 24 in BC and their caregivers. So these numbers give an overview of what our youth are currently facing. I won't go into too much detail with this data, as everyone here knows the issues and challenges our youth are unfortunately experiencing. We all know of or have had direct experience with a young person struggling with their mental or physical health and the lack of free, youth-friendly resources and supports available, not to mention the complicated systems that youth and their families must navigate to find the right help, if it's even available. Our youth in the qathet region deserve better. Foundry is a province-wide network of integrated health and wellness services for young people ages 12 to 24, and it's a proven solution for these challenges. The development of Foundry qathet involves the coming together of pre-existing youth-focused services already available in our community. It will provide a full range of services with an integrated approach that suits our community's highlighted needs. So as you can see here in this data, Foundry is a proven model for improving youth wellness that's been in action since the first one opened in 2015. And our community has now been gifted the chance to bring this incredible solution here. It's a unique once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that will serve this community for generations to come. So at Foundry, young people can access 5 core services at one youth-friendly location. And these are mental health care, substance use services, physical and sexual health care, youth and family peer supports, and social services. In today's presentation, I'm going to discuss the healthcare-related core services in more detail. All Foundries are designated healthcare centers. However, what sets Foundry apart from a regular healthcare facility is that we take an integrated and highly collaborative approach to youth healthcare. Foundry qathet will provide a comprehensive system of care that ensures health promotion, prevention, and early intervention, and that they're core components of our service delivery. All primary care services at Foundry qathet are youth and family centered and are collaborative and empowering to both. Primary care at Foundry qathet is team-based and collaborative. Everyone works together as a team, with staff from all core services working and communicating with the primary care team to support youth and their caregivers and provide optimal scope. Foundry qathet is integrated. Integration of services occurs through an intentional partnerships and collaborative intersectorial working relationships, with special attention on the actual process of integration. Services are timely, accessible, developmentally appropriate, socially inclusive, welcoming, equitable, and culturally safe. The space, service delivery, and service hours are designed to ensure this. Primary care services at all Foundry centers are continuously evaluated through evidence-informed practices and Foundry's data collection method called Toolbox. Primary care services at Foundry qathet are connected to the community. Services are created with community input, with ongoing efforts to connect and collaborate with community partners. Primary care services are culturally humble, and Foundry Central Office is currently building out an Indigenous wellness framework to promote cultural competency, safety, and humility across the network. So the goal in Foundry qathet is to provide comprehensive, high-quality healthcare for young people aged 12 to 24 in a way that complements and coordinates with community resources. So what is primary care at Foundry? Primary care is the first access to the healthcare system for many people, and it encompasses physical and sexual health, mental health, and substance use services. Like I said, Foundry takes an integrated and team-based approach across centers, meaning there are multiple professionals working as a team to support the health of youth and provide support to their caregivers. Primary care services at Foundry qathet will be planned in a way that reflects the unique context of our community. We have a wonderful group of healthcare professionals that are currently supporting the development of primary care in Foundry qathet. This model of care supports an integrated, interdisciplinary team approach. For example, a youth comes in presenting for physical health issues and identifies a need for income assistance. Social services partners are available on site for the primary care provider to connect the youth with, which allows for a fluid transition from one provider to another. Oh, missed those circles. And how does primary care look within Foundry? There are three main streams of service that the primary care team aim to provide at Foundry qathet. Primary care can be offered both through walk-in and by appointment, depending on the availability of primary care staff. Drop-in times will be aligned with walk-in counseling and peer support and other social services programming to support the integration. Some primary care concerns may fit into more than one category listed here. We aim to attach clients to longitudinal care based on their preferences. However, if a youth is already well connected with a family practitioner in their community and wants to continue seeking care from them, the visit would qualify as episodic or specialized and incorporate some information sharing with their existing external practitioner. Youth accessing longitudinal care at Foundry often are the ones experiencing multiple barriers to accessing traditional health care services and are not connected to other care. So Foundry qathet's primary care medical services are connected to the community. Primary care at the center is developed in partnership with Foundry qathet's community partners. Foundry qathet is working hard to communicate clearly with the community about primary care services that will be provided. Foundry qathet will be able to support community primary care providers working in the center with access to enhanced services that are youth-focused. And Foundry qathet has the ability to provide longitudinal care for complex youth with access to wraparound care integrated with other services. Foundry qathet youth clients who are aging out of Foundry services or stabilized well enough that they could be served well in a general practice setting are transitioned to general practitioners in the community who have self-identified an interest in working with youth and young adults. Foundry qathet's primary care medical services are accessible. There is center-based access to virtual care, which is supported by Foundry Provincial Virtual Care. Foundry qathet is aiming to have youth-friendly hours for primary care services, such as after-school hours and into the early evening. Foundry qathet will offer drop-in, same-day, and booked appointments. Drop-in hours will be several times per week and align with the drop-in counseling, peer support, and social services. Certain days and times will be available for the booked appointments and follow-ups. The Foundry aims to reach youth by providing barrier-free services and supports before they hit crisis. We want to reach young people early so that we can help address small problems before they become bigger ones, and primary care is an important part of this service. At Foundry, you can access services without needing a referral and on a drop-in basis. So whether a young person needs support for anxiety or depression, they want to see a family doctor, or they're just struggling with a stressful situation, Foundry qathet will help get them the services they need. So can you imagine a space like this in our community? We're designing out a beautiful space for all the youth in the Qathet Regional District to access and creating an incredible piece of infrastructure in the heart of our town. Here are some photos of Foundry centers around BC. Foundry qathet will be culturally safe, inclusive, and a youth-friendly space. Foundry qathet will be welcoming and accessible for all those who are accessing it. The youth of this community deserve a safe space to gather and connect with one another in a place where they are welcomed and celebrated, not just tolerated. And Foundry qathet will be that space. We're excited about our current progress on this initiative, and the future is even more promising. When the doors open, young people and their families in our community will no longer have to ask, where can we go for help? Because Foundry qathet will be the answer. Thank you for considering our request for funding. This is true preventative care for our youth, and together we can make this happen and create a space for the youth of today and tomorrow. Youth in our community deserve wraparound, youth-centered primary care services that are barrier-free, compassionate, inclusive, and non-judgmental. Financial support now will help the overall project stay on track and open on time. And the quicker we open the doors of Foundry qathet, the quicker we can start supporting our youth.
55 seconds to spare.
Pretty efficient.
Very impressive. Okay, thank you very much for your presentation and all the hard work you're doing. Before I jump in, I'm going to ask around our board. But first, I want to recognize that we have John Hackett, Tla'amin Nation representative on the Qathet Regional Hospital District, who has joined us during the presentation. So we now have a full hospital district one. I'm going to throw it open to the directors. Anyone want to ask any questions of the delegation? Director Southcott, and then Director Elliott. Director Lennox. Go ahead, floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. My interest in youth goes back to when I was growing up here, and I was involved in designing a youth center, which didn't really turn out to work. So it goes back a ways. Over the years, I've been aware of studies in Europe, I think started in Iceland, to try to address a whole bunch of problems with youth and young adults. If they don't have other things to do, then often self-management ends up in dysfunctional approaches like drugs, alcohol, and etc. And it takes a whole lot more time to reverse that and investment from society than it does to prevent it. So this looks all very lovely. However, I think if we compare it to what's available to the adult population of our society and communities, it's the same sort of thing basically, but it is an approach that aims at creating healthy adults. And this is what I'm getting out of this. I have a question that's not exact. I just had to make that point because it's something that really jumped out at me with your presentation this time. I think I've listened to your presentations, I don't know how many times now, right?
Yeah.
And every time something new comes out, it would suggest that there's going to be some pretty expensive professionals sitting around waiting for youth to come in. And I'm curious as to, obviously this works.
Mm-hmm.
This model works. So how do they figure that out? Like, how do they use their time efficiently and actually provide the kind of services that are provided in many foundries around the province in a way that that looks so good? How does that work? How do the people work?
We're talking about, for example, the primary care providers?
Scheduling and, with all the other responsibilities that these people who will be working in this one, can you speak to that, or?
I can speak to the primary care piece. We would recruit and retain doctors and nurses who are interested specifically in working with youth and understand Foundry and how it functions and how to integrate with other services. So they were already coming in with an investment to want to work with youth and make primary care youth-centered and youth-friendly. And in terms of them waiting around, for most people, their primary care is, and I can show you the data I can send an impact report from last year, the Foundry impact report, but goes over like how many youth are accessing different programs. So they're not often waiting around. There's youth coming in those drop-in times because they're running concurrently with all other services. So you've got your sexual health, your substance youth, your counseling. We've got the drop-in space open at that time. So youth who are maybe afraid to go visit a general practitioner, they're in this friendly space. Everything's running at the same time. There's some confidentiality about where they're going. No one knows if they're going to go see primary care or jump in to go see sexual health. It just makes it a more youth-friendly approach to it.
So the practitioners figure it out. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, and that's what at the moment, we have a clinical operations working group up and running, and it's with, we've got nurse practitioners sitting on it. We've got doctors, the Division of Family Practice, the PCN manager, all of us working together to figure out how do we want to do service delivery in Foundry qathet, and listening to the youth, listening to the primary care providers, and coming up with something that will work specifically for our community. And so I can't really point to each individual Foundry because every single one does one differently because it's very unique to the context of the community, which is the great approach of Foundry.
It's very reassuring to know that there are a number of them that are already working, and I'm sure that I'm sure that there's methods. Just it's awesome.
We have a really passionate group of primary care providers at the moment helping.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to kick it over to Director Elliott. Our clock is at 19 seconds, so I'm going to ask the Assembly if they would like to extend the time by 5 minutes. Okay, I'm seeing nods. Okay, Director Elliott, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you again.
I know, show up everywhere now.
No, it's excellent to absorb things more than once. When you were talking about a continuous evaluation, you talked about a thing called a toolbox.
Yeah, so that's Foundry's data collection platform. It's the same across all Foundry centers, and it's how they collect basically their data and review it and evaluate it. See what's working, what's not working, where can we improve.
Do we have Foundries currently in communities our size that are functioning?
Similar to our size, for example, Comox, Campbell River, not quite our size. There's one in the Kootenays as well. Yeah, there's multiple that we've looked at to see their data around primary care and how it would fit in our community.
Okay. And then would there be more information around the capital design along with the budgets attached to those, so there can be more information about, I know you have a budget of 5 million, but that's based on what it's not a detailed.
Yeah, we do have a Class D budget at the moment that breaks down all the construction costs, and then we've got our almost finalized schematic design. It's just going through the final step of approval.
And are you expecting any change between the Class D and the final?
The Class D is more like, our designer said, it's more like a Class C. Like, it's pretty accurate in terms of what the cost is going to be. And it's based on a lot of projects she's done before and the size of our space and what we need in the space.
And that amount was 5 million?
No, the total amount for the Class D off the top of my head is 6,625,000. But we already have some money put aside for that. So the 5 million is what we're left to fundraise.
Okay.
Yeah. Don't quote me on that number because I don't have it right in front of me, but I feel like it's that.
Yeah, I scribbled it. I can barely read.
Hopefully in pencil.
Director Lennox.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks again. It's good for people to understand. I guess my first question is from the presentation, sort of along the same lines as Director Elliott, where is the project at? Because you've identified like the 12,000 square foot facility. So maybe, and also for people that are watching and tied in with that, what is really the ask right now? Because I see there's a, be a champion, right? I like that terminology, and for the QRD to be but we need to define that, and then financially, again, sort of narrow that down for us, right? And that's the first question.
Which one's?
Well, basically, what's the ask, right, from us?
My original ask was 25,000, but that was based on asking the QRD and then the regional hospital district both for 25,000. But I was told that because we're a designated healthcare facility, we only fall under the regional hospital district. So I'm hoping to up our ask to 50,000.
Okay. Good. That's good to know.
And then in terms of project progress, we're right on track. We're just in like the final stages of lease negotiation. It's taken a bit to go back and forth because we're a nonprofit, so sometimes we function differently than renting out to a corporation, for example. So we're almost done there. Demolition of the space should start towards the end of July. So it's going to be demoed back. And then we should be starting construction. I think February 1st is our start date for construction. Yes.
Follow up, go ahead. Yeah, so I'm just, maybe we can anticipate grant and aid applications and that type of thing. Or if you already have, right? That
For the regional
one that we
Yeah.
had, is that what you were saying? The original one was the.
I had applied to the qathet regional district and then was told that we fit more into this.
Good, just so we define where we're at historically. And just a quick follow-up question along Director Southcott. How does the people that are involved obtain the care with no referrals being needed? You need those physicians and caregivers to basically be engaged already and sort of be part of your staff. Is that the idea? Maybe you could flesh that out a bit.
In terms of the primary care providers, so whoever would be providing primary care gets a good overview of integration. There's people from Foundry Central Office that will come down and they do a special workshop on integration and how it's supposed to function in the Foundry Center, because it's different than your traditional primary care. And then anyone offering services there, we would make sure that they're feeling comfortable and have training in how to offer youth-friendly services and work with families and caregivers and work with youth.
Awesome, thanks.
Okay, we got 5 seconds left, but I see Director Brander has raised his hand. So with unanimous consent of the Assembly, I'd like to ask for another 5 minutes. Seeing thumbs up. Okay, Director Brander, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks, Chair. The presenter has mentioned a number of services that Foundry would offer. I'm curious if Youth and Family offers any of those services currently.
Yeah, that's the whole purpose of Foundry, is that we're taking pre-existing services and then putting them all under one roof. Because with our operational budget, we would not be able to provide the scope of services that that are offered in most Foundries. But because we're using pre-existing community providers, services, and reaching out to all these people and drafting up MOAs and MOUs, we're able to offer like a wide scope. So Youth and Family would definitely be offering services under Foundry, and quite a few of our services do fit under it.
Okay, so you're offering some of these services already, and all these services are being offered in the community, or?
Not all of them. They're kind of scattered, and a lot of things you need a referral for, and there's wait lists. So for example, drop-in counseling, that's not offered anywhere. Drop-in primary care is not offered anywhere. Those types of things would be new within the Foundry, but a lot of the social services would be ones that are already existing in the community. And then other services, like for example, Youth and Family offers parent-teen mediation. That would just be something that could supplement Foundry services, or our Strength and Self-Counseling program for teens. That could be something that supplements the programming that we already do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And I'll put myself on the speakers list, and then I'll get Director Elliott for the second kick at the can. Okay, so my question comes in relation to capital funding and the Ministry of Health. Has the Ministry of Health committed any funding so far?
Yeah, so every Foundry gets 1.5 million towards their capital. And so when I said that original number of 6,625,000, and then that we're fundraising for 5 million, that's taking into account the 1.5 million that we already have towards the capital development.
Okay, and as I understand, you're asking for $50,000 from the Qathet Regional Hospital District. We did have a bit of a discussion at the Finance Committee. This is for Mr. Hackett, who is not a member of the Qathet Regional District, and I do believe that we have referred that application to this board.
Much, Chair. Tomorrow at the hospital, or at the regional district, you will consider a motion to promote this to the Qathet Regional Hospital District.
That makes sense. We forwarded it from the Finance Committee. It will eventually come to the hospital district, but it's got to go through the Regional District Board, which happens tomorrow. So sorry for the delay. It's government. We don't go quick. Okay, so 50,000. You got 1.5 from Vancouver Coastal Health. Oh, and my last one, because later on the agenda, there's a motion about applying to the Ministry of Health for designated healthcare facilities, and Foundries all become healthcare facilities. So I'm just wondering, is that automatically, or is there some paperwork that has to be filed for that?
I'm not sure about that, actually. I just know that our operational funding comes in part from the Ministry of Health, and so for that reason, we have to all follow the same standards and be a designated healthcare facility. I can reach out to Foundry Central Office and get you that answer, though.
Okay. And we can also check with our corporate officer because regional hospital districts, we have some limitations on what we can fund. My understanding is it has to be a designated healthcare facility, and we've recently learned that we actually can apply to have areas designated healthcare facilities. So it's my understanding. I'm seeing some nods. Okay. That's all the questions from me. Director Elliott, second kick at the can.
Thank you, Chair. So currently in our community, there are youth that may be eligible for CLBC funding once they turn 18, 19 probably in this province. But they've lacked the and don't become diagnosed prior to that age and then forevermore are not eligible for CLBC. Is there going to be opportunities to increase for CLBC screening for people who have fallen through the cracks and maybe not had a diagnosis already by the time they show up at the Foundry? Or is that something people will still specifically have to pursue even if they weren't aware of it as an option?
That is actually something that's not come across our desk. So knowing that that's a gap in service is definitely something we can look into.
Thank you. And you know what CLBC?
Yeah, they are actually a partner that sits on one of our tables. That just hasn't never been brought up in discussion. So I can reach out to them and just ask, how we can support that in Foundry.
Thank you.
Okay, and I'm not seeing any other hands up. So thank you very much for your presentation, and we've just run out of time at 0. Thank you. Okay, on to the next item, 4.2, Mark Scott, Cathy, Korolek, Carolyn, Jackson, Sherry Burton, on behalf of the Westview Ratepayers Society returns the lease between that regional hospital district. And for members of the public, they have also submitted some correspondence, which falls under delegation inquiries, and also in relation to a lease that can be found on a 79 to 79 to 98, not 198. Go ahead, the floor is yours. We'll start the clock.
Okay, good afternoon, Chair and Hospital Board Directors. Thanks for the opportunity to present this delegation to you today. My name is Mark Scott, and I'm a member of the Westview Ratepayers Society Supportive Housing Subcommittee. I represent the Lower Willington Heights subdivision, which is the area that is occupied west of Joyce Avenue between Harvey and Abbotsford Street down to Marine Avenue. Unfortunately, Rick Craig, the president of the Westview Ratepayers Society and chair of this subcommittee, is in Vancouver and unable to present today. In his absence, Cathy Korolek, vice president of the Westview Ratepayers Society, joins me as a representative of the board today. Additionally, Upper Willington Heights Community Subdivision Representative Carolyn Jackson is on the Zoom call today, and her area that she represents is above Joyce Avenue, south of the supportive housing building, towards Alberni Street up to Ontario Avenue. The Westview Ratepayers, and in particular this subcommittee, strongly support housing the unhoused in our community. For almost 3 years, the subcommittee has been engaging with BC Housing, supportive housing provider, Lift Community Services, and City Council to address significant operational issues with the current supportive housing building at 4910 Joyce Avenue. We believe that an external evaluation of the housing provider's management and operation is necessary. Furthermore, any identified issues need to be addressed before the construction of a second supportive housing building, shelter complex care facility adjacent to the Qathet Regional Hospital should occur. Since the shelter closed, and that I'm referring to the emergency shelter that closed in March, dedicated members of our organization and the public have been providing outreach to unhoused individuals and participating in ongoing discussions with the MLA Randine Neal's office, the city, and other community members to try and find a viable solution to the emergency shelter space. Attached to our delegation submission, you'll find the lease agreement between the Powell River Regional Hospital Board and the Provincial Rental Housing Corporation, which is administered by BC Housing Corporation, and also attached are the terms of the instrument for your reference. We note that initial term for the lease was 40 years with options for 2 consecutive 10-year renewals. And I'd like to draw your attention to section 9.4 of the lease agreement, nuisance. And in the lease, it states that a tenant will not carry on or suffer or permit to be carried on in or upon the leased area anything which constitutes a nuisance or annoyance to any neighboring properties or their owners or occupants. For greater certainty, the use of the leased area for the permitted uses will not constitute a nuisance. According to the Freedom of Information response record we obtained attached to the presentation, we have 2 letters dated September 27th, 2023 from the hospital board to the executive director of Delyth Community Services. These letters include the following statements. We would like to address with you the ongoing antisocial issues spilling from Delyth's supportive housing facility, 4910 Joyce Avenue, onto adjacent regional hospital district property. Your district staff have spent numerous hours dealing with the issues from the site, talking to the following: RCMP, Delyth staff, city bylaw officers, and neighbors. We believe that the root cause of these issues stems from the activities introduced by the establishment of the supportive housing unit. The results of this correspondence was that the hospital board decided to fire smart the property and request Delyth to contribute funding toward the same. Well, the letters referenced ongoing antisocial issues and stated that the root cause of these issues stems from activities introduced by the supportive housing unit. It does not appear that these concerns were addressed directly with the tenant in accordance with the nuisance clause in the lease. Our members in the community report frequent instances of violence, sexual assaults, coercion within the supportive housing facility. We also hear regular reports of disturbances, theft, antisocial behavior affecting neighboring properties and businesses, including owners and occupants. We respectfully request that the hospital board, in its capacity as landlord, fulfill its fiduciary duty and address these ongoing nuisance issues that are affecting both the supportive housing facility and the neighboring properties. We believe that these issues largely relate to the current management and operations of the housing provider. We urge the hospital board as landlord to ensure compliance with the terms of the instrument and specifically to evaluate the current tenant's performance. We ask that appropriate action be taken to address the nuisance concerns raised by the community. And given that this is an urgent matter, we especially with the lack of a shelter space, we respectfully request that the hospital board take immediate action to ensure the tenant addresses the nuisance issues. And as this is a public matter, we believe the board's action should be shared publicly so that the community can monitor the resolution of the concerns. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Mark Scott.
Thank you. We got 4 minutes left.
Yeah, wow.
Okay, I'm first going to ask the members of the board if they have any questions for the delegation. Oh, Southcott, what is yours first?
Thank you, Chair. Familiar with your concerns. Having heard them either very similarly stated or anyway, at council chambers. So the question that occurs to me is, there's an assumption that the problems or the nuisance situation that you're referring to comes from 4910 Joyce. And your language is spilling from. That's something I've wondered about. Particularly, I do have a fairly extensive long-term history of working with the kind of population that we have in question. Do you have any metrics or do you have any way of measuring nuisance issues as to source? So those who may be either residents of or directly associated with 4910 Joyce, and those who are homeless. Because in my experience, the homeless population is a source of an awful lot more problems than people who are housed or sheltered even, although shelter I don't consider, nobody considers housing.
Mark, there's the public behind you with their hand up. I'm not sure if they're part of your delegation and you would like to.
Oh,
I too live at 4910 Saskatchewan Avenue. And every day we have police going by, we got fire trucks going by, we got people stealing people's water pressures, lawnmowers, wheelbarrows. I had a person that lived at what we call Crystal Palace, and she was trying to get into my car. I called the police. The police were able to catch her, the act, and then they were also able to get all the stuff that she stole from everybody's cars on our street. We're tired of this. We're paying good property taxes for nothing. When is this going to end? If people are so concerned about the homeless, find a place away. My daughter, who was raised in Paw River, has just moved back with her family. She's been here for 2 months. She's homeless. I'm not talking about she's on drugs and stuff like that. She can't find a place. We're helping. So there's got to be help there for somebody. Let's not just help these people that take drugs so they can go shopping at our properties. We worked hard for what we got. That's what I'm saying. I don't think that you guys would want these people in your backyard. Not when it happens every single day. And the buggies that goes by.
Hold on, I'm gonna.
So I've got a response
Yeah.
as well to Rob's comment. And so the subcommittee does recognize that the impacts the community is experiencing from homelessness, criminal activity is not all tied to 4910 Joyce Avenue. And the reports that we're making, we're bringing forward to the delegation, yes, we do have direct evidence linking nuisance behavior to the residents specifically. So when we talk about thefts, we're talking about thefts from residents that are in our neighborhoods, in businesses that are directly tied and linked to the supportive housing building. Myself and the other representative of the subcommittee, Carolyn Jackson, we participated in a community advisory committee since the establishment of the building. And so at that table, all the issues related to the implementation and delivery of the house came to the committee. And so emergency services and city and other reps were at that table. So we're well versed globally on the issues tied to the building through that committee, plus through our own neighborhoods. So when I talk about thefts, I know that thefts occur in this community that are not tied to residents there, but I am just specifically speaking to nuisance factors related to that building and the residents. And one of the things that's connected on the unhoused is there's a strong association with the residents and the unhoused. They have relationships, they support one another, they have similar like activities. So a lot of them might have good intentions, but a lot of the good intentions do contribute to nuisance related issues. So yes, we do have direct evidence related to nuisance. We can provide that. One of the things we wanted to provide in our original submission were video clips that members of the organization and the public had taken, which got rejected. We would like to follow up specifically on the reference that was originally referred to us as to why it couldn't be submitted. That's for another day, but we can definitely come back if necessary with direct related evidence to support every claim we're making. And just to reiterate on those specifics in terms of, like, nuisance is a very general term too. If we look at like the dictionary aspect of what is nuisance, it's something that invades or interferes with another's rights or interests as the use or enjoyment of property by offensive, annoying, dangerous, or obstructive behaviors or unhealthy actions. So we have that occurring. It has been occurring since the house has opened. We know also as a subcommittee that to some degree, that kind of operation of supportive housing building comes with an impact. We accept that, but we believe the impacts we're experiencing are excessive and above and beyond what should be tolerated. And we draw that conclusion from members and resources that we've looked into in terms of other communities and other supportive housing buildings. And Cathy Korolek, she moved to Paw River a number of years ago. She came from Grand Forks. She was a municipal director. and a hospital board director. She toured several of these other supportive housing buildings. And if you'd like, I could ask Cathy to speak to it, but essentially we know, and we have reports from other communities where they're not operating perfect, but they're operating much better with less impact than what we're currently experiencing here. So that's what we're drawing upon.
Okay. Before I hand the floor to Director Lennox, I'm going to ask the consent of the assembly for another 5 minutes. Seeing nods. Okay, and then I'll put Director Elliott on after Director Lennox. Director Lennox, the floor is yours.
And thanks very much. You know, I think the whole community has been very patient, actually trying to take some action on this topic. So I give you credit for, you know, working with us in the time frame. You know, looking at the lease, you know, there's a large section on hazardous materials, but not really the hazardous materials that our first responders and other people are facing when at that. And I think it's not unreasonable to hold tenants to conditions of a lease, no matter who you are. And so from what I know of what goes on there, from family members who live in the neighborhood, are part of your ratepayers, it's more than just a nuisance. And you know, there's safety issues, and nobody I've ever talked to has said that they don't want to support people's housing, and that's not what it's about at all. I think people are looking to take constructive action within the very limited tools that we have. That's what we're seeing before us right now. So people aren't knee-jerk reacting, they're following the process, they're coming before us. So I think it's, for me anyways, trying to figure out what actions that we can take that are reasonable. A question for you. Has there been any improvement on the level of nuisance over the history of the facility? Because it's been there for a while, it's ebbed and flowed. There's been efforts through the lift and other, you know, BC Housing. So in a short answer, can you give us?
It's erratic, and ebb and flow is a good way of describing it. And I believe one of the contributing factors is the fluctuation of staffing and direction within the provider's hierarchy. They've had a lot of managers since its operation. And as you know, any kind of operation and organization that has an important job as what they have there needs to have consistency, needs to have skills, needs to have rules and you know, follow through. And I think my own interpretation has, from being on the committee for so long and on the community advisory committee, is variation in staffing, skill levels, and direction is one of the big contributing factors. Because when we go again to other supportive housing buildings where we say, well, ours is running pretty good, we have impacts, but not so significant, let's compare. They tell us that they've had consistent and supervision, and that seems to be one of the answers. So
Just in the interest of time too, I want to let the other directors.
And I just want on the ebbs and flows, like one of the things we're sort of seeing a stronger force right now with the shelter. That's why I tried to reference the shelter situation and having a lot of people that don't have access to an emergency shelter. That relationship and linkage between unhoused and shelter residents is strong. And so we're seeing a little bit of a surge because of that relationship and tie.
Just quickly, as far as action, you mentioned what is the legal definition of nuisance? So really coming out of this, I'd like to hear from the other directors, but for our staff and where we can go, what are the options that we have around that? Because as you say, there are ways to do this better.
Everyone, seeing thumbs. Okay, Director Elliott, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mark. We've been on some of the same processes together. So from the process that you mentioned in your speech, speech delegation talk, you said the fire smarting was the result of, but there was also fences put up and other measures put in that were designed to help mitigate the flow of people. And so it is my understanding that that has had a difference to a minimal effect. Some of the issue, I think, has to do with policing, and the need for policing has gone up, and police are having a hard time keeping their staff levels up and staffing up to the level that you ask them to staff up to. And that is an overall RCMP recruitment issue that's affecting not just us, but many other communities. The jurisdiction for anyone to do policing activities is not there. And so some of the issues that are happening are to do with lack of policing and the need for policing to be active in the areas where they need to be. So Lifton, nobody's allowed to do the policing for them. We don't have, no one else has jurisdiction to do that kind of activity. They can do security within their own lands only, but if someone's doing something outside that fence, they don't have jurisdiction to do anything about that. And so there's two separate issues that we are lumping together when we're talking about this. One is there stuff going on actually on the site that could be managed better? And so that's what you're here to talk about. Is there things happening outside of the site that the people who are managing the site should be managing better? That's the gray area where there isn't a lot of enforcement or ability for us or them or anybody to actually do anything about other than have conversations, which we can all do. So policing needs to step up. We've over at the city, I'm not talking about the regional district, but over the city, we've approved an extra officer. So I think we're up to 22 that we've funded over at the city and approved in our budget. And we're barely maintaining a contingent of 60, that budget of 22. And that's a staffing recruitment issue that the RCMP is struggling with Canada-wide.
Carolyn, do you have a question?
Yes. So given that we've both been there and we've been learning together where the boundaries are, specifically the nuisances that you think we can address are what?
Well,
Can I just jump in here, Mark?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks. Thank you, Director Elliott. We're not specifically focusing on
Chair recognizes Sherry Burton as one of the delegations. Sorry, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. There's also an incredible nuisance within the facility itself. So you have active drug dealers living there. There's coercion. There's sexual assault directly within the building. And yes, there is issues outside the building as well. And we're kind of pleading with the hospital board to take a more active role as landlord to address nuisance, and because if these haven't been addressed, the correspondence we attached to the delegation was just an example that even the hospital board has recognized the unrest that's happening and the social concerns. So, but they've never been addressed directly with the tenant. The tenant needs to address those issues. So that's what we're trying to focus on here, and asking the hospital board as landlord to fulfill its fiduciary duties.
And just to add to that, I think we're not asking the hospital board to solve all the problems and challenges of the supportive housing building. That's not the ask. We're coming forward as a community to say, I think things could be better, and we all play a role in it. And I recognize that every agency, department, and organization is part of finding solutions and making it better, whether we're talking about the RCMP, the hospital board, the operator, BC Housing. So we're just bringing this forward to officially present it to the board to say you have linkage on this discussion on this community-minded topic. And that is your relationship with the leaseholder, that's BC Housing, and yourselves. So where you now hopefully have the means to say, we've been presented by a delegation that's brought up issues about nuisance, which is a clause in our lease agreement. We'd like to talk to you about it. And they'll be aware of it as well because we brought it forward to them. So we're hoping that community-minded solutions are built into this into the future to not zero out every issue, but make it better. It's not getting better. It's been waffling and ebbing and flowing. And that's why we've come forward to you, just to ask for help to make this better, to not eliminate it, but to make it better for the residents in there, plus what's going on in the community. And the argument that the provider just has a sole responsibility to control the actions and activities within the grounds, I don't really accept. I think a provider and the landlord and the delivery agents that have power on these programs, they hold a responsibility with the activities of the residents outside it as well, especially if they've been brought forward to try and improve on it. And I don't buy this, the landlord has no control. One of the things we were told at the beginning of the opening of the house, that a good neighborhood agreement would be a requirement for every resident that was going to be going into the building. And they explained to us, this is to ensure that every resident understands their role and responsibility within the community, doing respectful regard activities outside of the home and trying to not upset the apple cart. Well, that agreement never happened. We never got good neighborhood agreements. And I believe it's one of the failures of the program. We brought it up at the committee level. Why didn't you do it? And we weren't really given a satisfactory answer. But something as simple as that is drilling into a tenant that resides under a social program that taxpayers are paying. There's an expectation that, you know, you're going to do good things, you're going to have minimal impact. And I recognize that you're hampered to some degree, but there should be an expectation and actions taken that if negative activities happen, it comes back to that resident to say, you know, this wasn't good. We need to improve your behavior, just like you would with a child. So,
okay. In the interest of time, and I'm going to ask the assembly on this one. So we're getting a request from members of the public, from a delegation, about addressing some of these issues related to nuisance. Now, just so that everyone's on the same page, the regional hospital district, as has been clarified, is the landlord, and the tenant is the Provincial Rental Housing Corporation, which is provincial government. Lease Supportive Services, that actually operates the building, has an agreement with BC Housing. So my thoughts are, is if the regional hospital district is going to, you know, have any ground to stand on and push for something, we would actually be going to push the Ministry of Housing. Like, I don't think it's appropriate for this hospital board to be trying to get into lift stuff. It's, you know, we don't have the operational contract with Lift. We have an agreement here with the Provincial Rental Housing Corporation. And I think what I'm hearing around the table is the operators have a responsibility for the site itself. The lease, when it refers to nuisance, spreads beyond the site into some of the neighboring properties. I know we had an issue in the past with the fire smarting. And if we are going to pursue any action, I think that the action that we take would be to go after the Ministry of Housing to take a look at deeper impact, or to even provide more supports, because quite often we have issues in our community where they just aren't funding the staff supports that are needed. Just one sec. Is that the correct understanding around the assembly of what we're actually talking about here today? Because we don't have a motion on the floor. Is that kind of an understanding? Sorry, go ahead, Director Elliott. And I know we don't have a motion on the floor, and if that's okay with everyone, just a brief discussion of the directors.
I'm just a little lost with process. So we've had a delegation and we've done question period.
Yes.
Normally, if we wanted to put it on an agenda for discussion, that would be at a separate time, and it would come back with some kind of report or something. So you've made some statements that may or may not be true. The discussion part of it belongs on an agenda elsewhere, I believe, like the discussion of the board.
The process can occur a variety of ways. Sometimes we get a delegation and then we have a motion directly related to the delegation. Sometimes the motion will be as simple as requesting a staff report. So as the delegation is now drawing to a close, my question for the assembly is, does anyone have a motion that they would like to put forward at this time for this board today in relation to the delegation?
So my understanding, oh, sorry.
So, sorry, Director Southcott, did you have
To allow Director Elliott to finish whatever her thoughts were, but I have two questions actually.
Director Elliott?
So my concern is that the ask is for us to do some type of, I won't call it enforcement, but preliminary inquiry with our tenants around options for improving things. And those would need to be within our mandate from the agreement. And that may be a bit of a legal thing. And so I'm not sure if any motion we had should I don't know that we could make a full enough motion at this point in time. I think we need to think about it.
That's a very good question, and I'm going to ask my corporate officer and the CAO if they have anything on those lines.
Thank you, Chair. As this is a complex item of business, we've touched that it impacts agreements, it impacts land use. There's a lot of things. We wouldn't want to consider a brand new item of business. We would want to consider a notice of motion for placement on a future agenda. So that can occur here, or a notice of motion can come forward at the next hospital board meeting, outlining exactly what wants to be addressed, and then that would be put on to the next meeting.
Or would a motion asking for a staff report be in order today, or is that still a little too preliminary?
We do not have a motion on the table. Sometimes it would be appropriate to refer this to staff to ask for next steps, but nobody came here anticipating that was going to happen or that would be debated. So really, because it impacts so many different things, it might be better to address it as a notice of motion.
Okay. I'm always anticipating everything, but that's the point. Director Southcott is next on the speakers list. And just to remind everyone, we don't have a motion on the floor. It's just what is our plan for the next step?
Thank you, Chair. Consequently, I have two questions. One is addresses the definition of nuisance in the lease. The wording is for greater certainty. The use of the leased area for the permitted uses will not constitute a nuisance. Now that's in 9.4. That refers back to the use, which is in the whereas clause at the beginning of the lease, section C. The tenant may operate and maintain the improvements, basically to provide housing. I think that's in C. Tenant may operate and maintain the improvements, all the terms and conditions and provisions set forth in lease. No, it's not that. Anyway, essentially, it's a very simple lease for the provision of housing. Already, so the question is, what does the first question is, if the provision of the permitted uses does not constitute a nuisance, then would it be fair to say that the nuisance, particularly being referred to, is activity that is outside of the actual leased area? I realize this is a question that is kind of aside from questioning what's actually going on within the building, which, as our chair pointed out, is the business of the operator, the contractor, and who they're contracted to, which is the BC Housing, essentially, the rental agency that's connected with BC Housing. So it isn't directly our business. We could advocate. Getting back to the question, is there anything that is relevant to what the regional hospital district can do that has anything to do with the definition of nuisance? Hope that's clear. And it's a question for staff, really.
That's a really good question. I'm not sure if they'll be able to answer that immediately, or they might need to have that as sent off to a staff report or ask a lawyer, because nuisance is one of those things that lawyers will debate. So, question to our staff. Do we have an answer for Director Southcott's question on the spot?
Thank you, Chair. I believe you and Director Elliott just answered it. That might be a legal question to be addressed that way.
Thanks, Chair. I think it's obvious, like, our questions need to be answered before we can take any action. Some of them are legal, interpretation, etc. So let's have a notice of motion for the next, I will make that notice of motion for the next meeting, since we don't want to delay any further. And I'll craft one up. Can I do that on the fly, or just give you
After.
You can do it after. Is that
I
appropriate?
think we can do it by the time we get to new business or even further.
Chair, can I just make a comment from our perspective on that question and that topic?
Okay, you got 2 minutes.
2 minutes, yeah. Our interpretation of that nuisance clause that's written into the lease agreement, when it references neighboring properties, ties in activities related to the residents and their actions outside of the property. It's not just within the property. And we had a legal evaluation of that, and that with that wording, including neighboring properties, it doesn't exclude things outside of it. So that was just our interpretation.
Okay, thank you. And since Director Lennox is crafting a notice of motion, I guess that brings us to the end of our delegation period. Thank you very much for coming.
The last comment, if I may, we're fully in agreement with your interpretation that if the board does anything, and we really hope you do, your relationship is with BC Housing and not the operator. But we hope the issues that we brought forward regarding the operation will be part of the discussion with BC Housing Corporation. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your time and bringing in the information.
Allowing us to come here. Thanks. Thanks.
Okay, now it is 4 o'clock on the dot, and
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I was just going to suggest that we have all the planning committee members here. If maybe you should ask them if they're okay with delaying.
that's what I was just about to do. It is now 4 o'clock. We do have a planning committee meeting scheduled for 4 o'clock. We have all the planning committee members here. Myself, I'm leaning that we continue on with the Regional Hospital District meeting, but I was going to ask, are there any members in attendance that are here specifically for the planning committee meeting? Anyone online that's here specifically? Oh, we got John Haggerty is here specifically for the planning committee. If that's the case, maybe we should do a postpone or just a recess of our hospital district and then.
Well, unless John Hackett can't wait.
Oh, sorry.
John Hackett here.
That's also important.
Here.
Alternate director, John Hackett. How's your, how busy is your schedule right now?
Oh, he had to leave at
Oh,
4 o'clock.
You had to leave the meeting at 4 o'clock.
We asked too late.
We asked too late. Well, in that case, do we want to take a brief recess and our planning committee real quick? I have a member of the public here.
So a motion to adjourn until the planning committee meeting concludes. Would be in order.
So moved.
And moved by Director Lennox and seconded by Director Southcott. All in favor?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. So
Any opposed? None. That is carried. We are
adjourned and we will reconvene after the planning committee.
We are adjourned and we will reconvene after the planning committee.
We just need 5 minutes, Chair.
That way we don't have John Haggerty waiting all day for us.
So just so for those in attendance, we're just going to have to start our live stream. So it's just going to be about 5 minutes.